It started with a phone call, a routine check, nothing out of the ordinary. An Amazon driver just doing his job, delivering a package to a quiet home in Paulding County, Georgia. But what he saw that day made him stop. It wasn't just a single dog barking, it was dozens. Faint, desperate sounds coming from beyond the fence. The driver hesitated, stepping closer. That's when he noticed them. Chains. Row after row. Dogs. Their ribs pressing against their skin, barely able to stand. Some didn't move at all. He dialed 911, and when officers arrived, what they uncovered would leave even the most experienced investigators shaken. Over 100 pit bulls, tied up, starving, left to suffer in silence, and at the center of it all, one man, a man who would soon receive one of the longest prison sentences for animal cruelty in history, 475 years. His name? Vincent Burrell. This is the story of what really happened in that backyard and how it led to a sentence unlike any other. Welcome to True Crime Files, where real stories meet hard truths. We uncover the most shocking, disturbing, and unforgettable true crime cases, stories that demand to be heard, facts that can't be ignored. If you want to understand the crimes that changed lives and shook communities, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because the truth doesn't wait, and neither should you. November 2022. A quiet neighborhood in Paulding County, Georgia. It was supposed to be just another day. A delivery driver making his rounds, dropping off packages, moving from one doorstep to the next, but something made him stop. A sound, faint at first, almost easy to ignore, then another and another, whimpers. The kind that don't come from a single dog, the kind that don't sound normal. He stepped closer. Behind the fence, beyond the trees, something wasn't right. Dogs, dozens of them, some barely moving, some too weak to lift their heads, chains wrapped around their necks, metal collars digging into raw skin, their eyes empty, lifeless, resigned. The driver didn't hesitate. He made the call. 911, and soon officers were at the property, standing before the rusted gate, unsure of what they were about to walk into. The first officer on the scene described the smell before anything else. Decay, filth, blood. It hung in the air, thick and sour, impossible to ignore. They stepped through the gate, boots crunching over dry leaves and dirt, and then they saw them. Row after row of pit bulls. Over 100, some standing, some slumped over, ribs pressing against skin so tight it looked like it might tear. Bowls scattered but empty. No food, no water, just chains, heavy, rusted, locked tight. No way out. Some of the dogs lifted their heads at the sound of footsteps, eyes filled with something between hope and fear. Others didn't react at all. As officers moved deeper into the yard, the reality of what they were looking at became clear. This wasn't just neglect. This wasn't just abandonment. This was something else entirely. Faint scars on faces, fresh wounds on legs and backs, patches of fur missing, torn ears, signs of fighting, forced, brutal, inescapable. And then, in the distance, something worse. A pile. Bones, fur, bodies discarded like trash, some fresh, some too old to tell how long they had been there. A pit bull pup, barely alive, too weak to lift its head, laid beside the heap. It wasn't dead, but it wasn't far from it. The officers called for backup, animal control, crime scene investigators. They needed more people, more resources, more hands to pull these animals out of this nightmare. And then they knocked on the door. The man inside, Vincent Burrell, answered. He didn't run, he didn't argue. He just stared at them. Cold, blank. And when they asked him about the dogs, his answer was simple. They're mine. Nothing more. No explanation. No remorse, just 2 words. 2 words that would soon lead to one of the longest sentences for animal cruelty in U.S. history. The investigation moved fast. Within hours, law enforcement secured a search warrant. Officers combed through the property, documenting every dog, every chain, every scar. They counted the bodies, some buried, some left out in the open. They found journals, betting logs, receipts, transactions that told a deeper story. This wasn't just a backyard kennel, this was an operation, a business built on suffering. Veterinarians arrived on the scene, examining the surviving dogs one by one. Malnutrition, dehydration, open wounds left untreated for weeks, teeth filed down, scars crisscrossing faces, necks, legs, the telltale signs of dog fighting. Some of the animals flinched at the slightest movement, others showed no reaction at all, as if they had already accepted their fate. The few that could stand wagged their tails weakly, desperate for a shred of kindness, and as the vets worked, the officers kept going, searching every corner of the property. That's when they found the cages. Metal crates stacked on top of each other, some with dogs inside, crammed so tightly they could barely move, others empty but stained, the smell of blood, the remnants of a fight long since over, chains hanging from hooks, a training area with scratch marks dug deep into the dirt. This wasn't just neglect, this was torture. And there was no doubt these dogs were never meant to leave this place alive. The case against Vincent Burrell built itself. The evidence was undeniable. Over 100 dogs, each one a victim. Betting logs showing thousands of dollars exchanged. Video footage, text messages, witness statements. The prosecution wasted no time. He was charged with 93 counts of dog fighting, 10 counts of aggravated animal cruelty, and multiple other offenses. If convicted on all charges, he faced a sentence unlike anything seen before in cases like this. The trial was swift. Prosecutors presented graphic evidence, photos of the conditions, medical reports detailing the suffering of each dog. The jury saw the bodies. They heard from the officers who made the discovery, from the veterinarians who treated the survivors. And when it was Burrell's turn to speak, he had nothing to say. No defense, no justification, no attempt to explain what he had done. The verdict came quickly, guilty on every count. And then, the sentencing. 475 years in prison, one of the harshest sentences ever handed down for animal cruelty. The judge made it clear, this wasn't just about punishment, this was about setting a precedent, making sure no one else would dare to do the same, that a crime like this could not be ignored. In the aftermath, the rescued dogs were placed in shelters, each one given a second chance. Some found new homes, families willing to give them the love they had never known. Others remained in care, too traumatized to adjust to normal life. But they were safe, and they would never feel a chain around their necks again. The case sparked national outrage. Animal rights groups pushed for stronger laws, harsher penalties for dog fighting. It forced a conversation about the hidden world of animal cruelty, about the suffering that happens behind closed doors. And while Burrell would spend the rest of his life behind bars, the scars of what he had done remained. The dogs couldn't speak, they couldn't tell their own story, but their scars did, their eyes did, and the people who fought to save them made sure the world would never forget. This case raises questions that can't be ignored. Over 100 dogs, suffering in silence for who knows how long. A man who showed no remorse. A sentence unlike any other. But was it enough? Was justice truly served? Some say 475 years sends a clear message that crimes like this will not be tolerated. Others believe no punishment could ever undo the suffering inflicted on these animals. What do you think? Was this the right outcome, or should the laws be even stricter? Let us know in the comments. And what about the dogs? Some were lucky enough to find new homes. Others may never recover from what they endured. Should more be done to help the victims of animal cruelty? Should there be stronger protections, earlier interventions, harsher penalties for those who exploit and abuse? Your thoughts matter. Share them below. If you've made it this far, you care about the truth, about justice, about the voices that can't speak for themselves. If you want to hear more cases like this, real stories, real consequences, make sure to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. And if you believe these stories need to be heard, hit the like button. It helps more people see what really happens behind closed doors. It helps keep these conversations alive. This case may be closed, but there are more out there, more stories, more voices waiting to be heard. And together we can make sure they are never forgotten.